elevation and resource efficiency. He also is the managing partner of Dolphin Capital Group, another equity fund that invests in lower middle market companies in the Intermountain West region. He and his wife Jennifer are the parents of 3 children. He's been our guest before. He's a very engaging speaker, and I think has a perspective along the lines of political science and business that is a nice complement to what you heard last week, but from a different perspective in terms of entrepreneurship and equity funds and investing and things like that. But he has lots of good stories, and please join me in welcoming him.
Thanks, and there's lots of paths for political science undergrads, because we were actually at BYU at the same time as undergrads, and he went off for a PhD, and I went off to business, and it's fun. My parents gave me a lot of grief about being a political science major. They said, "Oh, what are you going to do with political science? That's such a lame dead end major." And what's really interesting for me is, in Dolphin Capital Group, there are 3 of us, and we're working in finance generally, but really in entrepreneurship. All of us have political science undergrads, and I just think it's a great way to build rigor in your thinking and your reading and your writing. And I think a lot of, to the extent that I've had success in my career, I think a lot of it has come from, thinking, reading, and writing well. The math is the easy part. It's really deconstructing arguments, communicating to people, even in, when you're leading a company, being able to communicate to lots of people through writing is such a great skill. And I think you get that in spades here at BYU, especially. Do they still do Poli-Sci 200, like that brutal writing course? I tell you, I think that was probably the best course that I ever took, from undergrad through graduate school. Just a great, great course. Is Stan still around?
Dan Nielsen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's on leave at Princeton this year.
Okay.
He's around.
Okay, great. Well.
And they've never heard that line about 200 before, have you?
Really? Have other people said that?
Yeah, they have.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Really? Yeah.
That's a common theme that I think is interesting and helpful to hear, I hope.
All right, so I'm gonna tell you my story and kind of how I guess took my education here and translated it into a career, and really want to answer any questions that you guys have. There we go. Okay, so this is my basic agenda. And we'll just go ahead and get started. So what do I do for a living? So I'm a partner in a private equity fund, and what we do is we invest in private businesses. So typically the companies that we invest in have between $10 million and $100 million in revenue. If you think about public companies, they're more than 10 times that size, and so we invest in private businesses that are looking for capital to grow. The other thing that we do that's unique to our fund is we want to invest in businesses that make the world a better place. And that, to me, is really what differentiates us. As I think about business and entrepreneurship, I think it's one of the ways that you can have a hugely meaningful impact on the world. A lot of you are political science majors, I assume, because you want careers of impact. And I'm telling you, through business, you can have major impact on people's lives. You can, by being a great employer, paying fair wages, thinking about your supply chain, thinking about all the stakeholders involved, you can have a meaningful impact on people, on communities, on families, and that's what we're trying to do. And so the ways that we do that is to invest in companies whose product and services intrinsically try to solve social and environmental problems. And we do that through the profitable deployment of capital. And so we're not charity. We're trying to generate outsized financial returns. And part of our thesis is that companies who do things the right way, they will be winners in the marketplace because they will attract consumers at a lower cost of acquisition. They'll attract employees who are attracted to their mission. And there's a self-sustaining cycle of good companies doing things the right way, getting employees who become advocates who can then serve their customers, and so they get more customers, and there's great virtuous cycle. There's a lot of problems in this world. They're not going to be solved through charity alone. They're not going to be solved by governments. They're going to be solved by entrepreneurs, and that's what we're trying to enable. And so for us, here's a portfolio of businesses that we are investors in today. I'll just give you guys a quick highlight of these so you can get a kind of a sense for the types of companies we work with. And so Urban Remedy, anybody here from San Francisco? Have you heard of Urban Remedy? Okay, so they are a plant-based food and beverage company. They have retail stores, they sell through Whole Foods, they have kiosks that they put into businesses, and they're a great growing business, and Amazon and General Mills just invested in that business with us. The Bar Method, has anybody been to a Bar Method studio? So we invested in them. They had about 80 locations. They have 130 now. They're a fitness studio chain doing something called Bar. We've helped create more than 50 women-owned businesses, and these are fitness studios. Manduka, anybody here do yoga? So there you go. So Manduka is a premium yoga brand. They make the world's best, most sustainable yoga mat. We think that getting more people doing yoga actually will make the world a better place. I'm saying that right here at BYU. I think it's mindfulness and meditation and stretching, all of that stuff is good for you and good for the world. Traditional medicinals. Anybody hear about them? Yeah? So as a active LDS guy, I'm an investor in a medicinal tea company. And go read the Doctrine and Covenants, the Word of Wisdom. It talks about how herbs are placed on this earth for our benefit. And what traditional medicinals does is they take herbs for sore throats, they take herbs for laxatives, they take herbs for lactation, and they put it in a tea bag, and people drink it. And I met with the CEO yesterday. He said, a lot of people think about these organic food companies only appealing to people who can drive Volvos and shop at Whole Foods. Traditional medicinals has taken the approach that we want to make our products available to everybody. Walmart is their biggest customer, and a good portion of their sales at Walmart go to the lactation tea. 20% or more of those sales go to people who are on food stamps, and they're looking for an all-natural way to improve lactation. Mixed is a salad restaurant chain that buys local, fresh, organic vegetables and helps people transition from eating burgers and pizzas to eating salads. And then Ragnar Relay is a running relay race company. Anybody here run a Ragnar? Yeah. So there's millions of people who have run Ragnars. Foundation Source manages the back end of private foundations. Winder Farms is a food delivery company. And then Great Salt Lake Artemia, they harvest brine shrimp out of the Great Salt Lake, and they sell it to sustainable fish farms around the world. So that's kind of the core of what we do. We're not drilling wells in Africa. We're generally investing in consumer product companies that are doing things the right way, treating the environment right, treating their people right, and building great businesses. So what is private equity? So what we do is we go out and we raise money from high net worth individuals or financial institutions like, don't think about like banks, but think about like university endowments or pension funds or places where large amounts of capital are sitting, and they will invest 10 or 20% of their assets in alternative vehicles outside of the public stock market in things like private equity. And so we raise money from them and high net worth individuals, and then we put that capital to work into companies like I just described. And the way that we get paid is we generate a management fee on the capital that we have under management. And then once we've returned all the capital to our investors and we've paid back all the fees, then we keep 20% of the upside. And that structure, it's called the 2 and 20 structure, is probably how 95% of private equity firms operate. And so, there's lots of different types of private equity. There's venture capital, which would be not us. Venture capital would be going into smaller businesses, that have higher risk and higher reward, typically software, biotech type of companies. We don't do that. We invest in that next stage of growth businesses that have proven a business model and now they want to expand geographically, they want to expand via product line, maybe they want to make acquisitions, we provide that capital. And then there's another stage, which is buyout. So then the companies grow and they get bigger, and how you run a $50 million business is different than how you run a $500 million business, and there's a different capital source for that type of market. And so we kind of sit, mostly in growth and sometimes in buyout. Typical hold periods for a private equity fund are maybe 5 years. Our holding period is, longer than that, probably 7 or 8 years on average. And some of that goes down to our mission, is that we're trying to build these mission-aligned businesses who are doing things the right way, longer hold periods. We don't want to make short-term decisions for short-term financial gain. We'd rather hold businesses for a long time, stay true to their principles, and then have longer-term capital appreciation. And firm structure is that, so I'm a general partner in a fund. We make all the investment decisions. Our investors are called limited partners. So they give us money, we give their money back, and then we keep a portion of the upside. And, people in private equity firms, I saw a stat last week that said 40% of people in private equity firms have a degree from Harvard or Stanford. I think that's probably very true I guess that's very true. I even think about in the partners that I've worked with over the years, I guess every single one has had one of those degrees. So it's kind of a weird industry in that way. Lots of people break into the industry and going from, they'll graduate from undergrad, they'll go work at an investment bank for a while, then they might go work for a private equity fund, and they go back to graduate school, and they kind of get back into that industry. And that's a typical route. For me and actually my partners, we were all entrepreneurs, and we had success as entrepreneurs, and we started to invest our capital combined with others, had some more success, and then we started a private equity fund. And so I'm really not a financial engineer. I'm really more of an entrepreneur, and I'll tell you a little bit how I got into that. And then a day in the life, if you decided that this was something that you wanted to do, if you came out of undergrad and you landed at a private equity firm, what you would do a lot of is you'd build models, financial models, and so you become a kind of a spreadsheet geek for maybe a year or two. You do a lot of research. You meet with a lot of companies. We hired somebody from here. This is, I don't know, maybe almost a decade ago. She was a TA of a class that we were teaching here on financing new ventures, and she was fantastic. And so we hired her into our firm. We made her, kind of a junior partner, and she got to interact with CEOs every day. She interacted with us. She did a great job. Then she went into a portfolio company and was their CFO, and helped us buy that business, run that business, and sell that business. And I think she's had a fulfilling career that way. But you basically start off doing a lot of spreadsheets, learn a bunch of industries, kind of be an inch thick across a lot of areas, and kind of get a perspective on how companies are financed. So I guess I'll stop there for a second and ask if there's any questions at this point. Yeah.
What are the working hours of a typical, entry-level private equity analyst?
So not as brutal as like investment banking. It's generally the second job. It's generally people go and work for a banking or a consulting firm, and then they go work for a private equity firm. Ours is different in that I think we just have a lot of balance. Like I work a lot, but I get up in the morning, I take my son to swim practice, and I work out at the gym, and then I work kind of through the day, and then I'll take my kid to soccer practice and do that in the afternoon, and then do whatever I'm doing at night, and then I'll work again in the evening. But I would say that the hours probably are closer to kind of a consultant than a banker. So I think if you're working for a big time firm, you're putting in a ton of hours, but not like the investment banking lifestyle. But honestly, I don't really know because I didn't grow up in the industry that way. If you worked for us, you'd work half of your days at home and a third of your days on the road, and you'd have a lot of flexibility, but you'd be working a lot. Yeah.
At what point in your education did you realize this was where you were gravitating towards rather than to another?
Yeah, I never started with a plan like, oh my gosh, I want to be a partner in a private equity firm. It just never happened for me that way. Has anybody read Clayton Christensen's book, How Will You Measure Your Life? It's a great book and kind of like thinking about your life plan. And he talks about how he wanted one day to be the editor of the Wall Street Journal. And so he started off as a consultant, and then he had an opportunity to go and go to a PhD program at Harvard. He's like, oh, that would actually be interesting. Let me go do that. And then coming out of academia, he had a chance to buy a business, and he's like, man, this isn't really on my path, but let me kind of go do that. And then he kind of bounces around to being strategic about what he wants to do, but also opportunistic. And he kind of found his way to his true calling, which happened to be not the editor of the Wall Street Journal. For me, what I wanted to do is I wanted to be in control of my own destiny. And I wanted to have the flexibility to coach my kids' teams. I wanted to have the flexibility to go on lots of vacations. I didn't want people telling me where I had to be every hour of the day. And so I kind of gravitated eventually towards entrepreneurship. And then entrepreneurship led me towards private equity. And really because what I wanted to do is I didn't want to have all my eggs in one basket. As an entrepreneur, you have enormous upside, but you're kind of concentrated in your risk. And what appealed to me about this is that I can have, my risk spread across lots of places. And so if any one thing went up or down, it wouldn't, potentially destroy me. And then I had to raise a private equity fund because at some point my own capital runs out. And so I had partners that had deeper pockets than I did, and they could play the game a little bit, well, probably a lot longer than I could have. But we kind of got together and said, let's combine our others and let's start a private equity firm. And it was really a way to enable more entrepreneurship. All right.
Let me ask a question. If I wanted
Yeah.
to invest as a limited partner, how much capital do I need to bring to the table?
Yeah, so there's two things. Our fund, I think our minimum investor invests about $250. Well, exactly. That's what our minimum was. That's what but also you have to be a registered investor, or I'm sorry, an accredited investor.
Okay.
And the rules have changed on that a little bit, but the general rules, as I understand them right now, is you have to have either a net worth of over $3 million outside of the equity of your home, or you have to have current income of over $500,000 a year. And that makes you an accredited investor. And to invest in most private equity funds, you have to be an accredited investor. And you sign, when you invest in a private equity fund, you sign a paper that says, I meet these requirements. And the reason why they do that is because we don't have SEC filings, we don't do all the things that a public company does, and so there's this extra layer of protection that says you have to have a sophisticated investor, and this is what the SEC has defined as sophisticated investor.
And does that mean just if they have a lot of money, they would have presumed that they know something about and not giving it to somebody that will waste it? Is that the
That's the thesis.
All right.
Yep. Yeah.
So if you work for a university endowment fund, does somebody on the staff are they a licensed investor? Or?
So the endowment would be the one that would meet those accredited investor requirements by having a certain amount of assets. Yep. All right. Okay, so my experience, so I was a poli-sci undergrad. I thought I wanted to go to law school, and maybe like some of you, and so I was doing the things I needed to do for that. I'm from California. I worked for my local California state legislator as an intern, and then I did the program up at the Utah State Capitol, the internship program they do up there. Do they still do that? That was a fantastic experience. I know everybody wants to go to Washington, D.C., but I think the stuff that you get to do at the state capitol, these guys have no staff. You are their only staff. And at one point, I was working for a representative in Springville, and there was a debate upon, about states' rights and things that states should do versus the federal government should do. And I was taking a constitutional law class here, and I just studied the 10th Amendment, and I had written a little paper about it. And he's like, I want to get up and I want to give a speech about the 10th Amendment. So I took my paper, I cut it down from 10 pages to a page and a half, and he basically got up and he read my paper as his speech in the state legislature. It was really cool. And then I parlayed that experience into another internship at the Department of Economic Development. And what was interesting about that is I had this job where I had to track bills as they moved through the legislature. And so imagine, you know, it was quite the boring job. I'd have to go to this like office and say, oh, okay, these are the 30 bills that we care about as a department. What committee are they in and who are the sponsors and yada, yada, yada. And I was kind of tracking that. And so every day I'd come up with a spreadsheet and I would track that. And my idea was, and this was back in like 95, was, well, why don't we build a little website that tracks these? And so I got HTML for Dummies, and I built this little web tracking app to, you know, track things as they move through the state legislature. And I knew just a little bit about that. Literally, it was like HTML for Dummies. And all of a sudden, I was like the smartest guy on the internet. And so, you know, at the department, it was like this big deal. I got to meet a bunch of people, and they thought I was some tech whiz. I'm like, I'm just a poli-sci student at BYU. But what I was able to do is that when I started applying for jobs, I said, hey, listen, I've got all these writing and research skills, I'm a pretty smart guy, and I was able to teach myself all this technology stuff. So, you know, like I'm not afraid of math and stuff. And I think that got me that first job. And so, yeah. And then what happened, so I did that, and then one day, anybody have some of these sandals? I sound like a really granola guy. I invest in like these organic food companies, and now I'm showing Birkenstocks, but that's funny. So my roommate here at BYU, he worked at Foot Locker at the University Mall. And he was there one day and he called me and he said, hey, they've got all these, Foot Locker is getting out of the sandals business, and so we're selling our sandals for $9 a pair. You should come down here and get some. At the time, they were selling for like 80 or 90 bucks a pair. And so I went there and I bought some Birkenstocks, and I was with a friend of mine, and we're like, well, we should buy all of them. And so we maxed out our credit cards and we bought every pair of Birkenstocks at the University Mall. And they were like, well, if they're getting out of the sandals business, we should go buy them from all the Foot Lockers. So we borrowed a friend's truck and we drove to every Foot Locker in the state of Utah, and we bought every pair of Birkenstocks for $9 a pair, and we ended up with 250 pairs of Birkenstocks. And so we're sitting in our apartment and we're like, okay, we know these are worth more than $9, but how in the heck are we going to sell them? And in true BYU fashion, we said, well, door to door. So we started knocking on doors and selling Birkenstocks. It's so funny to think about now. Hey, we got some big. Want to come out to my van? I've got some Birkenstocks. And so that didn't work. And so we tried a few other things. And then we ended up setting up, it was springtime, and we ended up we set up at the corner by what is now the Gold's Gym over by King Henry Apartments. And so on that little intersection there, on a Saturday, we took our ironing board from our apartment and we set it up as our table. And we got big speakers and we had loud music playing and we had free pizza there. And we sold all the Birkenstocks across 2 Saturdays. And so, I had I felt like I had wads of money. And I'm like, I made this much money on 2 Saturdays. This is crazy. And so also in typical BYU fashion, I took some of that and I got engaged. And then it really made me think about, okay, what do I want to do? Do I really want to go to law school, or do I want to do something more entrepreneurial? It was so fun selling those shoes. And I made so much money in a little bit amount of time. I'm like, I don't think I should go to law school. And so I didn't. I got a job at Accenture. Do they still recruit here? Or it used to be called Anderson Consulting. They're a consulting firm that broke off from one of the big accounting firms. And I basically convinced them that, hey, I know internet. Internet is going to take off. I taught myself how to do a little bit of programming, and I can read and write and talk to your clients. You should hire me. And they did. And so I got a job. We moved to San Francisco. And the first project I get put on is up at Microsoft. So just imagine, at Microsoft, helping them develop products for the internet. And I'm like this poli-sci dude who can barely put two pieces of code together. So they put me through some technology boot camp at that Accenture ran. They had a little university in Chicago that was their corporate training center, and they put everybody through 6 weeks of training, and they put you on the client site. And so the person who was next to me in training had a computer science degree from Harvard, and then here I am trying to figure out how to do this stuff, in my 6 weeks. So anyway, so I get up to Microsoft, and I just find what projects can I add a lot of value on? Projects that are research intensive, projects that require writing. And I found that because I was a great writer, I got good visibility. And what I eventually found out though was I'm never going to be a great technologist. It's just not what I'm going to be good at. So I developed enough of a technical background there that I said, well, I think I can sell stuff. So I got to transition my career from making technology to marketing and selling technology. And so I left Anderson, or Accenture, and I joined a software startup called Financial Fusion. And they made internet banking software. And so what I was able to convince them was, hey, I just spent a year, on a project at Microsoft. I got to be one of the smartest people on the internet because of that. And I was at a consulting firm, and you're a software startup, and you need somebody who can talk to the technical people and tell them what the customers want. That's where I want to be. I want to figure out what the customer wants, and I want to tell the technical people how to build it. And so that's a product management job. And so I did that, and this company was, in the first pre.com, and we had great success. We signed up 60 of the 100 largest banks to use our software, and then a company that bought us, the company which is now SAP. And so I stayed on there, and I ran kind of a financial services product line, and then said, I've got to really build build on my skill set. I've got to learn some core business skills, and so I decided to go back and get my MBA, and that was a great experience. I mean, I think I learned a ton in my MBA. I probably forgot 90% of what I learned, but it was, it gave me confidence to do other things in business, and it gave me a pedigree that I can do something, in private equity. Yeah.
How many years of experience how many working years did you have before you went back?
Yeah, I graduated in 96, and I started my MBA in 2002. So I had 6 years of experience. So I was a little bit on the older side, but not so much. I think the average at the time was 4 or 5 years. And I was a little bit more older too, because I had 2 years of admission. So I kind of skewed a little bit older in my class, but not too much so. I think that's pretty typical of MBA programs now. They still want you to go have some work experience. So this is a good experience, and what's great about being in an MBA is particularly your second year, you have all kinds of free time. And so I use that free time to do entrepreneurial stuff. And one thing completely bombed, one was partially successful, and then one was actually pretty successful. And this was a company called, it was called the Genus Group, and we put on technology conferences. And so what I had done is when I was running this, the software product line, I would take it to a lot of trade shows where bankers would hang out. And that's how we would sign up customers. And I always felt like I was on the wrong side of that transaction, because you'd spend a lot of money to go to these trade shows in order to talk to customers. And I always thought, man, that trade show operator, they're probably doing pretty well. They're collecting all this money from all the vendors who want to come. They're collecting all this money from attendees, and all they're doing is renting a hotel, and they're kind of letting these people come together. So I said, I could do that during business school. And so I had kind of played around with open source software, and a friend of mine who was also a poli-sci student at BYU, he was at Stanford Law School, and we decided to start this conference together. And we were both kind of, we were both in Silicon Valley. We had both done some technical internships, and so we thought we could pull this together. And so we started to put on this conference idea, and we started to put it on our credit cards. We had to hire a developer to build a website. We had to go to a hotel, and we had hotel rooms, and we also put that on our credit cards. And this was, we started this in the fall, and in December, we were about $250,000 into this thing, and we had no revenue. So you think about, I'm in business school, so I'm racking up all that kind of expense in business school. I don't have a job, and I've got now $250,000 of credit card debt. Well, not just, credit card and debt to vendors who I had promised that we're going to do this event, we're going to pay you, but we're going to pay you after the event. And so we launched our website, and after 2 weeks of launching our website, we had exactly one person who had paid to come to our event and was a classmate of mine who probably did it out of pity. And so at the end of the year, we had to decide, okay, so do we keep on spending, or do we shut this down and we kind of, take our losses? And it was incredibly stressful. So what we decided was, we said, well, let's try a new marketing tactic. We were telling people, come to our conference and we'll give you, sign up early and we will give you $200 off. A ticket to our conference is $1,500. And so sign up now and we'll give you $200 off. And nobody was signing up. And so we said, well, what if we, and we're trying to attract people who worked at big technology companies. And we said, well, what if we took that $200 and said, sign up for our conference by January 15th and we'll give you a free iPod. And all of a sudden, like changing the incentive from saving their employer money to putting a gift in their pocket totally changed how the conference, how the registrations were received. And the registrations just started rolling in. And I would go to class, and then I would go on our website, and I'd hit refresh, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just made $1,500 in the last hour, as just people were just starting to crank through this website and sign up for these registrations. And so it was wildly successful, and we ended up selling the business on the day I graduated. So I'm like, walking down the aisle, I'm texting my attorney to get the documents done, and I got a wire for selling the company on the exact day that I graduated. So, and that to me cemented that I need to be an entrepreneur. I need to do my own thing and have that excitement and have that control. I had a job offer at Google, and Eric Schmidt was a professor at Stanford, and I had taken a class from him, and I won the business plan competition. And that led to a series of interviews at Google, and I had a job offer to go to Google. This was pre-IPO, and to be a product manager there. And so I was doing that. At the same time, I was working with the guys who had started the software company that I worked with to look at kind of deals and investing together. And we had a couple of deals in our pipeline, but nothing was really closed yet. And I thought, I really want to go do that entrepreneurial thing. And so I turned down Google. People thought I was friggin' crazy, like literally crazy. And Google's like, people don't tell us no. Are you kidding? Are you sure? And the great blessing in my life is I really can't remember how many stock options I was offered for that job. Because if I did, I might do the calculation, well, if I would have done that versus what I do now. But anyway, so I decided to go do something really entrepreneurial. And that's kind of, and I still do that today. I do basically what I did as I left school. And so kind of what are my points? Career paths are not always straight and logical. I would have never thought I was a private equity fund manager when I was at BYU. Another important point for me is good mentors early in my career. So, my partners today are the same guys that I worked with back at that software company. They've been great mentors. They've been great partners. They've watched over me and helped me develop my career, and I'm just very, very grateful for them. The other thing is be good at something. I think all of you are going to be good researchers, writers, thinkers, and readers, and you're going to be better than 99% of people out there. And have confidence in that because it's really, really important. I also think that actually getting a job is a pretty good idea. Some people say, "Oh, I've got this great idea out of undergrad, and I want to go start this company that does this." And 9 times out of 10, when they come to me and I look at it, because I evaluate deals for a living, 9 times out of 10 I think that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And 1 out of 10, I think, oh my gosh, you should drop out of school right now and you should go do that. And if you really feel like you've got that one idea, sure, maybe pursue that path, but I'd be really, really careful because, that's a high risk situation. I'm really grateful for my first jobs. The other thing is you don't need a lot of cash to be an entrepreneur. Like I told you, I mean, who wouldn't want to put $250,000 on credit cards, right? So you don't have to have it in the bank to go do it. And really, credit cards isn't fair. It's really trade credit. And so what you can do is you could go to vendors and say, I'm doing this business. I need extended terms for you, so give me your product now and I'll pay you in 90 days. And that gives you a chance to sell that product, collect it from customers, then reinvest that in your business. It's a misnomer to think that you have to come from rich parents or have resources yourself. I didn't have any of those things, and I was able to start businesses. So anybody can be an entrepreneur. Okay, I'm almost. So a couple years ago, I had my niece was a student at BYU, and she was a biology major, and she was studying environmental science. Great major, right? I said, well, Michelle, why do you want to do that? She's like, well, I want to make the world a better place. And you business people, you're just a bunch of greedy money grubbers. It was basically what she said. And I'm like, you know what? That's actually not true. I think business is a worthy profession. I think that business and entrepreneurs change the world. I don't think that all businesses are moral people, but I think that most of them actually are. And if you want to have sustainable change, companies who do things the right way and can reinvest those profits in growing their business, and they have business and products that are good for the world, is a way to have a meaningful impact on the world and on your career. And this is a favorite quote of mine. I'll just read it from the Book of Mormon. It says, think of your brethren like unto yourselves, and be familiar with all, and free with your substance, that they may be rich like unto you. But before ye seek riches, seek ye the kingdom of God. And after you have obtained a hope in Christ, and ye shall obtain riches, if you seek them, and you will seek them for the intent to do good, to clothe the naked, to feed the hungry, to liberate the captive, and administer relief to the sick and the afflicted. I don't think that you have to have resources to do those things, but I think that those with resources can have a huge, meaningful impact on the world. So anyway, I'll just leave it there. We're out of time. So companies matter. This is how we do things. These are some of the impact metrics that our companies have. Buying organic produce, creating jobs, creating female entrepreneurs, reducing carbon footprint. All of those kinds of things matter. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Come to the mic with questions, like usual.
Everybody wants to go watch the Kavanaugh hearings?
Yeah, they think that it's all on the exam, and it's not unless you put it on the exam. Does that make sense? So don't worry about it, just ask a question. The exam is what you answer, not what I ask.
Yeah, I'm not. There you go. Okay, so one question I had was, how did you deal with your failures? Those first few failures while you were getting your MBA, how did you deal and react to those failures?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question, because I think too often, people hear from entrepreneurs and it's like, oh my gosh, it's, we created this company and it just took off on fire and we, blah, blah. And that does not always happen, and it rarely happens. And almost every entrepreneur that I know, probably every entrepreneur I know, has failed and failed massively. I'd love to teach a class which is my biggest failure, and it's not like, oh, my biggest failure is I work too hard. No, my biggest failure is I raised a bunch of money, I invested it wrong, and I went bankrupt. And because that's actually what happens to people. I think I'm just an optimist, and also my failures haven't happened just early in my career. My failures happen every day. We've got, of those companies that we put up there, I'd say, 3 are just kicking butt. They're doing awesome. And then there's a middling, companies that are doing all right, and then there's 2 at the bottom that suck. and I don't know what we're going to do about them. And, and one of them might go bankrupt. And so it's not just something like, you reach success and you never have failure again. But, I'm an optimist. I just think that, people who work hard, do things the right way, you're going to pick yourselves up. Our system is structured to be pretty entrepreneur friendly. I don't think that you have to put everything on the line as an entrepreneur, such that if you fail, you lose everything. So for instance, I will never do a personal guarantee on a bank loan. If we can't get financing through equity, or if we can't get a bank loan based upon the assets of the business, then we probably shouldn't be borrowing. I don't want to put my family's future at risk so I could try to make some more money. So, I stress about my failures, and I think I'll have a lot more, but it doesn't stop me from, trying again. It's fun.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
How did you find the company that you wanted to work, or that you worked for right after you graduated?
Yeah, I found them through the on-campus recruiting, and I applied for a ton of jobs, and I got one job coming out of undergrad. So for me, it was a numbers game. I knew I was a little unusual. I was a poli-sci student who wasn't going directly to graduate school, so I wanted to cast a really wide net. I think the other thing I did that helped me was I networked through people that I knew, like people in my ward, people that my parents knew, and those led to some internships along the way that opened up doors. And so by the time I was applying, I had some real experience that I could point to convince somebody to kind of take a chance on me. So
Cool. Thank you.
thanks.
So my wife and I actually started a business, and thank you for being like my mother and telling me to get a job. My question is, obviously as an entrepreneur, the goal is that you don't have to give your resume to somebody again. But with that in mind, how would you frame it as someone who started a business? How do you even put like something like that on a resume? What's the most effective way that you've found?
I think I love hiring former entrepreneurs.
Okay.
Most businesses don't work, and a lot of entrepreneurs go through these cycles of being an entrepreneur and then being an employee again and all that. And also, I think I still have I don't know if I really have a resume, but I still have to go sell myself to people. I mean, I got to sell myself to investors. I got to sell myself to companies that we're trying to invest in. So I do even think now about kind of managing how I would present my experience to people. And I think, putting that, that you took risk and, whether it worked out or not on a resume, I think for the right employer, they'll look at that and say, right on, man, taking a chance, you're doing it, you've got leadership, you've got intuition, you're not really, afraid of risk. I wouldn't be worried about that. I do think, though, that, coming out of undergrad, if you can go land a job at a blue chip employer, a name brand, I think it stays with you your whole career. I just think that, if you go and work for Procter & Gamble, your whole life people are going to think that you're great at marketing. If you go work for Goldman Sachs, your whole life people are going to think that you're great at finance. I don't know if it's true, but I think it opens doors for an entire career.
Okay. Thank you.
So in doing private equity, and you said that when people come to you with ideas, 9 out of 10 of them, they're super jazzed about it, and they're saying, this is the best idea I've ever had, and you're sitting behind on the other side of the desk thinking, this idea is terrible. How do you what's your thought process on making the difference between, yes, we're going to invest, no, we're not, when it's, something close, and how do you actually tell people that, hey, without, trying to keep their spirits up and their creative, entrepreneur, you should keep pursuing the entrepreneurship, but this isn't it?
Yeah, that's a great question. On how do I tell people no that are students, it's probably different than outside. I think I owe it to them to be brutally honest. If I think it's a crappy idea, I'm just going to tell them, because I don't want them to go do something thinking that they misinterpreted, a professional investor thinking their idea was good. If I think it's bad, I'm going to really tell them it was bad. I'm not going to be a jerk about it, but And I'll try to say, hey, listen, it's great that you're thinking about this. You should go back to the drawing board. You seem like you're really creative, but this idea sucks. And I'm one of many voices they should talk to. Maybe they get 10 other voices that, I've been wrong, but I think I owe it to them to be positive about it. For me, I don't fund many businesses out of school. There are exceptions. So, like Ragnar, we invested. Those are 2 students out of BYU. They wanted to not take a job from like Ernst & Young and go do this company. That was probably a rare exception. The brine shrimp business, that came from some students out of Westminster College that introduced us to that. So that wasn't really a student business, but that's, we got the opportunity through a university. And then we had a property management firm that was started by an executive MBA student as a class project. So it's not like it never happens, but in, 15 years of doing it, it's happened 3 times. And that's just because, what we generally do is businesses that are of a certain size, and those are just not student-run businesses. So where I could be helpful is I can, become a personal investor. So outside the fund, I could put, my own money in, or I can, introduce them to people who might be more interested. So I do that, but again, it's probably 1 in 10 that I do that for.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So how many, you need to find businesses to invest in. So how do you find the businesses? Has there ever been a lull where you had no business to invest in? Do they just come to you? Do you have to advertise?
It's amazing. When you have a shingle out that says, I've got money to invest, people find you. But the way that we get our deal flow is we have 40 investors in our fund. Many of which are former business operators, some that we've worked with or some that have been successful through people we know, and they're a great source of deal flow to us. My partners and I have been doing this for a long time, so we have lots of, connections that bring us deals. And probably 2/3 of our deals come that way, and 1/3 come through intermediaries, like investment bankers who know that we're investing in a certain category, they're representing a company, and we're one of a dozen firms that they'll come talk to.
So how many do you look at before you accept?
So we make investments of 2 to 3 deals a year, and I bet in a year, in some form, I bet every day I see a couple of opportunities. And I see those and my partner sees those, so we probably see 1,000 opportunities, and we'll do 2 or 3 deals a year. That doesn't mean that we're diligencing all those opportunities. It's pretty easy to put them through a filter. Yeah.
Is it important to you to find investments that vary in their target groups, or you kind of explained that you tend to look for a certain size company, but do you look for a variety in the types of markets that these businesses?
Yeah, not too much, because we are, people should have absolutely a diversified portfolio. We're part of that, higher risk part of somebody's portfolio that I'm not worried about spreading risk around industries. I want to spread the risk around companies. I don't want to have all of our fund into one business. But right now we're probably overly concentrated in food. And if another food deal came by that I really liked, that wouldn't prevent me from doing it. I would still do it. Just because we're not asset allocators. We're looking for just high returns in our sector.
Let me ask one final question, and let me bring it back to school for a minute. As these students make decisions on classes to take or things to do that would be particularly productive while they're still in school, is there any advice you would offer?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would, and I've got 2 kids who are seniors in high school, and so I'm starting to think about this for them as well. I think that everybody should take some computer science classes. I just think you should learn to program something. I think it makes you better at Excel. I think that just so many careers are around that these days. I think about the little bit of technology skills that I picked up early in my career have been incredibly helpful to me. I also think statistics. I think no matter what you do in life, understanding how to interpret data.
It's like I paid you to answer these questions. You're just like, I didn't.
No.
I promise.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, thank you very much.